We had David Green on the show the other day, and he said you always want to be practicing when nobody else is. And as a thought in that same direction, it's cold in Georgia today, and it's always kind of fun to think about your college football team still practicing when it's cold, too cold to be outside. Maybe that's the scenario that Georgia's facing. Hey, guys, it's Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And, yeah, a lot of the nation does look towards Georgia. One of the 4 teams running the shot at the national championship. We're obviously talking a lot about that on today's program. Mike Johnson here coming up a little later on as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're glad you're with us. DawgNation Daily starts right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
It is not too early to start getting excited about the Rose Bowl, and we're certainly doing that here on DawgNation Daily. And as we look toward the game, I think that our thought process on this is very similar to what most of the country's probably is. If you're just a college football fan, you're not a Georgia fan, you're not a Sooners fan, I think the thing that you notice about the game right off the bat here is just how different these two teams are in terms of what they try to do in a given football game. And the matchup between the two, because they are excellent at what it is they hope to do, boy, it makes for an interesting contrast. And for a relatively inexperienced head coach in Kirby Smart just in his second year, and a very inexperienced and very young Lincoln Riley in his first year as the head coach of Oklahoma, the chess match between these two guys, Smart, an elite defensive mind, Riley, a top-flight offensive mind, this is going to be one of the interesting subplots here when you move ahead to January 1st and getting ready for this game. And obviously, from the Georgia side of things, Georgia's looking to see how it can exploit what it does well at the expense of what Oklahoma can do well. Because the last thing, and every Georgia fan knows this, and I think every Georgia fan would admit this, the last thing that Georgia wants to get into is some sort of shootout with a team like Oklahoma that's used to playing really, really fast. And that's not because Georgia's offense is not good. Georgia's offense is obviously very good this season at what it wants to do. But what it wants to do is quite a bit different than what Oklahoma's trying to do on a given day. To that point, and with that as the setup, I thought that Marcus Spears on the show Thinking Out Loud, which is kind of a fun show on the SEC network, it is to a certain degree a total ripoff of what we do on AT&T SEC Country Live, but nonetheless, Marcus Spears, Greg McElroy in kind of a casual setting get together and they talk about what's going on in the SEC. And on a recent show, I believe it was the episode from this week, Marcus Spears kind of laid out not just how Georgia could be successful against Oklahoma, but listen to the words that Spears used here. Sort of suggests the idea of a Georgia blowout against the Sooners if this one thing can happen. If you're a Georgia fan, my guess is you'll probably agree, but let's hear Marcus Spears on this point.
I think Georgia's going to have to use their offense to play defense against Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
And this run game and what Oklahoma defense has given up on the ground, I think Georgia looks there and says, we want to control the tempo of the game. You have to eliminate possessions from Baker Mayfield because if you give him enough, he's going to burn you. But if they can keep the ball away from him by having methodical drives, running the football like they did against an Auburn defense who was far better than this Oklahoma defense is, I think they can have a lot of success. I don't think this game will be close if Georgia is able to run the ball like we're used to seeing them run the ball.
I think that's absolutely true. I think everything that Marcus Spears says there is 100% accurate. That Georgia could, and I emphasize the word could here, it's not my prediction, we're still a long way away from any kind of predictions in this game, but Georgia could coast its way to an easy victory if it's about a lot of those faces that you just saw if you're watching us on video. Guys like DeAndre Swift, guys like Sony Michel, guys like Nick Chubb. I would suggest that Oklahoma should be, and if it's not, it's a fool, it should be just as concerned about how it stops the Georgia running backs as Georgia is rightly concerned about how it stops Baker Mayfield. I think that if the Oklahoma fans, the Oklahoma defense, isn't thinking about the Georgia running backs being just as big a threat in this game, I mean collectively together, as what Baker Mayfield is, then it's a total misrepresentation of what Georgia's going to be able to go out there and do in the Rose Bowl on January 1st. Because, and I love Spears' description of this, that it is a way of almost playing defense against Oklahoma by having running backs that go out there and chew up a lot of yards, chew up a lot of clock. That's really been the recipe for what Georgia has done all season long. And to add to what Marcus Spears also says there is, Georgia, in getting its retaliation against Auburn in the SEC championship game, also corrected really the only blemish that the offense had this season. That when it needed to go out and run in the key moments against Auburn, it was not able to do that. I'm talking about the matchup in Jordan-Hare Stadium back in the month of November. But that Auburn defense, nowhere near as, or much better, I should say, than the Oklahoma defense that Georgia's going to be playing in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California on January 1st, and the fact that Georgia did get it done. And you saw guys like Lamont Gilliard and Ben Cleveland, the new offensive line starter, opening holes and mauling people. It just suggests that's a true blueprint and path to victory for Georgia. Now, obviously, the flip side of this is, well, what if Georgia gets off to a slow start? What if the early going in the game is Oklahoma scoring points and Georgia maybe misfiring in a couple drives? At that point in time, making the trio of Georgia running backs a big part of the game plan becomes a little bit more difficult to do because Oklahoma at that point in time is going to put pressure on you to score points. And I think that's probably what David Pollack was mentioning when he talked about what Georgia needs to do in this game. It's a little slight contrast to Marcus Spears' description. And when I read this to you, it's going to sound like Pollack's taking a shot at Georgia, and I don't think that's what he's doing here really at all. I think he's just making a different point than the one that Marcus Spears made. What Pollack said on a recent ESPN broadcast, and I'm reading this from DawgNation.com, is that the offense is going to have to score. He means the Georgia offense, because Baker Mayfield's going to get 30 points. You can put 30 up there on their side. The Georgia offense is going to have to score. From a strategic standpoint, I don't necessarily agree with Pollack on that point, that this game is sort of destined to be played as a high-scoring game in the 30s. I mean, we have seen some of these SEC teams against high-powered offenses in playoff or national championship situations where it has worked out that way, but it hasn't necessarily always been the case in that regard. I mean, think about not just in the playoff era, but also in the BCS era here. I mean, you know, we saw Colt McCoy, a high-powered Texas offense, for the most part shut down by Alabama. We saw Sam Bradford in a high-powered Oklahoma offense years ago shut down by an SEC team in the national championship game. Think about the high-powered Oregon offense in 2010, shut down by what we would have not really probably described as a great Auburn defense, but that Auburn defense had a great day at the end of that 2010 season in that BCS national championship game. What we've kind of seen over and over again is that when you have one of these true elite SEC defenses against one of these high-powered offenses from west of the Mississippi, whether it be someone from the Big 12 or someone from the Pac-12, you know, the SEC defense, the physicality, the size, that has been enough to get a victory in a lot of times and keep the game much more low-scoring than what David Pollack suggests there. So I don't think it's necessarily a foregone conclusion that Georgia's going to win this thing 42-35 or it's not going to win it. Yes, that's kind of been the scenario with the Alabama-Clemson games of the last couple of years, but that's not the blueprint for how this one necessarily has to go. I think what we're going to find out about Georgia, and this is probably really, for me, the bottom line of the entire discussion, we know already that Georgia is a very good team. Otherwise, it wouldn't be 12-1. It wouldn't be SEC champion. It wouldn't be on its way to the college football playoff. Georgia, by what it's already done here in 2017, has proven that it's a very good team. But the threshold for winning a national championship is actually higher than very good. You've got to be truly elite. And the definition, I think, of truly elite is proven out in games like the one it's about to play against Oklahoma. The truly elite team, either Oklahoma with what it wants to do or Georgia with what it wants to do, is the team that goes out there and asserts its will on the other guy. Fewer possessions, or in Oklahoma's case, more possessions. In Oklahoma's case, more points. In Georgia's case, willing to settle and be satisfied with less points in order to get the pace of play in which they want. What makes this matchup so intriguing? Two very good teams that want to prove they're more than very good when they play in Pasadena. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We are glad to have you with us on our show today as we are getting ready for the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. One of the things we'll talk about a lot is the travel plans that many of you are making. I've been hearing from you in the comment section on that. I'll continue to hear more of that as we broadcast here today on DawgNation Daily. We may have some time to talk about this a little bit ourselves. Of course, let me say thank you for accessing our show however you got to us, whether it's at 10 a.m. on the DawgNation Facebook page. That's when we do the show live. We also air on the radio at noon in Athens on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and any time of the day or night, anywhere in the world as a podcast. iTunes, SoundCloud. We post the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com. We're just glad you found us for DawgNation Daily today. And by the way, thank you all for being a part of our DawgNation invasion to Atlanta this past week. What a great time we had there in the shadow of Mercedes-Benz Stadium, getting ready for our DawgNation retaliation against the Auburn Tigers. That was a lot of fun. Of course, it would not have been possible without our friends at R.S. Andrews, the home of the guaranteed $99 furnace tune-up. You know, it's freezing cold in Georgia today. Many of you watch from places outside Georgia, but we're right here in the heart of Atlanta. And I can tell you that I got the sweatshirt on today. I had the coat on. It's been a long time since I've worn a coat to work. Felt like I had to today. And, when you got these cold days wherever you live, it may be cold where you are. You want that furnace to be tuned up and ready to go for the winter season. That's why you want my friends from R.S. Andrews. Their guaranteed $99 furnace tune-up will make sure it's running and keeping you warm and toasty all winter long. Their clean, screen, trained, and timely techs will give your system a thorough check. So make sure you check them out online at rsandrews.com. Let me quickly remind you of something else that I mentioned yesterday. Obviously, many of you are wondering why we stopped giving away our Own the East t-shirts. We're going to have to push pause on that for a while. We've got a lot of things going on. We've got some surprise we'll be telling you about in the days ahead coming up here on DawgNation Daily. So for now, I'm going to push pause on that. I need to make sure I get the ones distributed to the people who did win them. Some of y'all are aggravated with me because I haven't done that yet, but we will get that taken care of. But we certainly appreciate you sharing the show on Twitter at DawgNation Daily. I'll retweet the link. I'll tweet the link. You can retweet that for us, and we'll hopefully get back to giving away some t-shirts again here very soon. We're just running a little low on our Own the East supply, so we'll kind of get back to that here at a certain point. So we appreciate that. It is Mike Johnson coming up in just a few moments here on DawgNation Daily. A lot to get into with him today, including Mike actually, as a player at Alabama, played in a Rose Bowl. So we'll get to hear from him about what the player experience is like here and what the Georgia players get a chance to enjoy here later on this month when they head towards January 1st. What a great honor it is for a group of seniors and players maybe playing their final game at Georgia. What a way to go out here over the course of the next couple of weeks with a Rose Bowl, with a potential of a national championship game. So we'll hear from Mike what it's like to be a part of this. That's really good stuff, and we'll do that with him coming up. Before we get to that, let me deal with a couple of coaching rumors here. And we kind of touched on this a little bit yesterday, and for the most part, I brushed this off at the time. I guess we've got some new developments since then. Let me start with Mel Tucker here first, who has been mentioned as a kind of finalist, so to speak, for the Tennessee job. And, Tucker, I guess, according to Mark Schlabach from ESPN, did get a second interview with Tennessee here. And I will have to admit that while I believe that Mel Tucker is going to one day be a very good head coach, there's really nothing in his resume, nothing in his background that would suggest that he shouldn't be a really good coach. He's done a great job with the Georgia defense, got the NFL track record here. He's well-liked, well-respected. He's going to be a really good head coaching candidate. I felt like taking the Tennessee job in this year probably just didn't really make a lot of sense for him, and the kind of thing that probably just wouldn't work out for one way or another. And plus, I sort of thought that Tennessee might be targeting either an experienced head coach, an offensive mind for its coaching position. But some things have kind of changed on that front a little bit. And we'll talk a little more about this in a few minutes on the show. But a couple of the guys that I thought they might have gone after are gone. Now, Mike Norvell seemed to have sailed for Tennessee some time ago. He was never really mentioned as a true legit finalist for the Tennessee job for whatever reason. He's now signed an extension. He's going to stay at Memphis. So Norvell's kind of out of this discussion, even though I think that probably would have been a pretty good hire for Tennessee to make. He's not a consideration here. Chad Morris, the guy that I thought was probably the favorite to get the Tennessee job as recently as yesterday, looks like he's now going to be the coach at Arkansas. So for all the discussion we've had about what a mess the Tennessee coaching search has been, I think now it's actually at its worst point because for the most part, all the truly legitimate candidates, especially the ones with experience, they, for the most part, have all been taken. They, for the most part, have all been kind of sort of scarfed up either by their current employer or a new job in the case of Morris going to Arkansas. And so now Tennessee is sort of forced to sort of redraw its list once again. And now the name like Mel Tucker may actually climb a little higher on that list. It does not seem like Tennessee wants to hire T. Martin, so I will admit that I probably take the idea of Tucker to Tennessee a little more seriously today than I would have taken it yesterday. And, of course, by the time many of you hear this either in radio podcast form, the audio version of our show, there'll be more wrinkles and twists in the story, I'm sure, by then. But as of now, I still don't believe Tucker's going to be the next coach at Tennessee, but I probably take the rumor maybe a little bit more seriously now than I would have a couple of minutes ago. The other name to mention here is James Coley, the very good wide receivers coach at Georgia, who also, according to Mark Schlabach, has kind of emerged as one of the finalists for the Texas A&M offensive coordinator position. Obviously, Coley has a relationship with Jimbo Fisher. Fisher's the new coach there in College Station. And once again, Coley was always one of those guys that I assume would start getting calls here pretty quickly. He's been an offensive coordinator before. He was at Miami. He is thought of as a really good recruiter. And obviously, offensive coordinator positions are one of those that you'd like to have kind of an alpha dog recruiter in. Coley is that. I always assumed that his next move might be back more towards a state of Florida type situation where he could utilize those recruiting inroads that he has there in that state. But obviously, the relationship with Jimbo Fisher may kind of rule here, and he may want to go back and work with Jimbo as an offensive coordinator. That would obviously be a vertical move, and the kind of thing that if he is offered that position, my guess is he would probably take it. So this is the position that you get yourself into. When you are good as a program, your assistants are going to be in demand, and Mel Tucker being in demand potentially by Tennessee, and James Coley being in demand almost certainly by Texas A&M. That's an example of the success that Georgia's enjoying as a program right now, and we'll obviously follow these stories as they play out here on DawgNation Daily. Let me mention one more thing here before we bring on Mike Johnson, though. This is potentially bad news for Oklahoma, and if you're a Georgia fan, it's way too early to know what any of this means. Rodney Anderson, the Oklahoma running back that we told you about yesterday, does tweet out a defense of himself. We find out that protective order that he received in the state of Oklahoma is related to a sexual assault allegation. This is obviously a really messy situation. Legally, I won't pretend to know what this means for his availability in the Rose Bowl, and I have no way of knowing if he's guilty or innocent or anything like that. I probably won't even wade into those waters on a complicated story like this. But for Oklahoma, this is a tough situation to be dealing with one of your most important players, the leading rusher, moving into the Rose Bowl here. This is one of those things of I'd be remiss to even try to explain how this is going to all work out, but it's definitely a viewpoint that Georgia fans are looking in on keenly right now to kind of see where things go with Rodney Anderson and the legal trouble that he's dealing with. We'll have more on that when it becomes available. For now, let me just say welcome back to a DawgNation Daily. Great to have you with us. Hope you enjoyed Mike Johnson. And we will say hello to my partner on AT&T SEC Country Live. He is Mike Johnson. On the SEC Country Facebook page, you can check us out each and every afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And Mike, welcome to the program. It's good to have you with us. Hope you're doing well this morning.
I'm doing good, man. I'm like everybody else in Atlanta, just trying to stay warm this morning, man. It's cold outside.
Yeah, unbelievably cold. We were talking about that a little bit before as well. On the one hand, I kind of like the winter. On the other hand, it's a lot more work to get ready in the morning when it's cold. You got to put on more layers. You got to put on more coats. So we're all kind of dealing with that in the state of Georgia right now. But nobody that's traveling out to Pasadena, California will probably have too much to worry about on that front when it comes to January 1st. And I told our audience before you joined us, one of the things I was looking forward to talking to you about on the show today was the fact that you actually have some experience with this. As an Alabama player, your team traveled out to a Rose Bowl. You were part of this. And I guess I'd love to hear some stories from you about what it's like as a player, how you're treated, how special it is, and just as a way of kind of giving us an idea of what the Georgia players themselves are going to get a chance to enjoy.
Yeah, it's all inspiring. I mean, it really is. You can listen to people on Twitter or people on TV talk about what the Rose Bowl is, but getting a chance to experience it firsthand and being out there for a game of this significance, it's not just playing in the Rose Bowl game, it's playing in a national semifinal for these guys. It was playing in a national title game for me out there against Texas in 2009, and man, the fireworks are going off. There's like a fog over the field. Keith Jackson does the coin toss. Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers did the national anthem. I mean, you name it, and that place has it, and everybody understands the feel kind of surrounding the game. I'm so excited for those players to get a chance to kind of dive into that. It really is part of college football lore. Going back for a long time now, 100 years. That Rose Bowl, has meant a lot to a lot of people and a lot of teams and a lot of games. And so getting out there and being able to experience that for these players right now out in Pasadena, the grandeur of that stadium, I think it's a huge deal, man. I cannot say it enough times to Georgia fans I've talked to. If you get a chance to go, if you have the money in your bank account, try to make it happen.
What was the week like as a player? Were you out there for a full week? Other than the practices, what were some of the events that you all were a part of as sort of a special treat for players? What was some of that like?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We practiced all week at Orange Coast College right there in L.A. We actually, that was probably an hour away from Pasadena. So we stayed out there for 5 nights, I believe, in L.A. And then, the night before the game, we actually went up and stayed a little closer to Pasadena. I can't remember the exact name of the town we stayed in, but a lot of fun stuff. We got to go to, we went to a comedy show. I remember Pablo Francisco was the guy that did the comedy show for us, and just trying to be treated, as a bowl game and trying to have a little bit of fun like that. But at the end of the day, also understanding that, hey, we're out here for a national title. All the bowl games that I was a part of before that, I'd been to the Cotton Bowl, I'd been to the Sugar Bowl, I've been to Shreveport a couple of times. You try to enjoy yourself during bowl practice, But when something this significant is on the line, you try to also get back to your room at a decent time and make sure you're getting sleep. Because you know what? If you win this game and win the next one, all of a sudden you can enjoy yourself for the rest of your life there in Athens, Georgia. You have to try to keep it, keep it in place and understand what's on the line, but also having a good time. And those people at the Rose Bowl do a really good job of making sure that happens.
And you mentioned something on AT&T SEC Country Live the other day, and I mentioned this briefly on our show, quoting you at the end of the day yesterday, and you kind of said something I thought was kind of interesting, that we already believe that there could be some potential for Baker Mayfield is just a different kind of quarterback than what SEC fans are used to seeing and what the Georgia defenders are used to seeing. He's a little bit more brash, maybe a little cockier. I mean, he's already kind of drawn the ire of some of our commenters here in our comment section on DawgNation Daily, the live version on video. So, you kind of suggested, hey, it's not that uncommon for there to be bad blood in these bowl games anyway, because you're kind of out there all week long with the same team, your opponent, and you see them a lot of different places, that there's actually a little bit more of a recipe for bad blood in the bowl game, even though you don't know much about your opponent, than in the typical game. Would you mind explaining a little bit more about that?
Yeah, listen, that happens. A lot of people don't understand this. When you're going to these dinners, there's like eating competitions or comedy shows, like I was pointing out before. I mean, I remember going to the Cotton Bowl in 2005, and we were part of a comedy show where I think Mike Leach was a Texas Tech head coach, and the comedians are all making fun of both teams. I mean, they're like putting pictures up, and they're saying Mike Leach is this and Mike Shue is this, and you see those guys all week. You pass them in the street. You pass them in the mall, in the shopping malls. You know where they're staying. You go to these bowl presser events where you're given interviews, and you don't usually make friends with a lot of those guys. It's kind of that cross the room stare where you say, hey, that might be number 85, or that might be number 71, or that's the quarterback. And it has a culture of feeling to where you just kind of have some bad blood. And I guarantee you, at one point, a guy like Roquan Smith is going to cross paths with Baker Mayfield, and they're going to kind of look at each other out of the corner of their eye, and you're going to say, you know what? This is going to be a lot of fun, but I'm not sure I like this guy right now. We're going to have to wait until we get to game time.
Well, especially when you think about the fact that for an Oklahoma team, that a lot of these kids are from Texas, and Oklahoma's been a power program in the Big 12, that it's just an entirely different brand of football. So, to a certain extent, the players on the field are doing more than just representing their university. The crimson and cream of Oklahoma, the red and black of Georgia. This is about kids from the sort of the deep southeast, in many cases from the state of Georgia, against kids from Texas or kids from that kind of plain state region that sort of views football a little bit different way. It's almost like a tug of war of ways of life, more so, and in addition to the fact that it's also two teams out there playing, correct?
Yeah, it definitely is. And listen, in the 5 years I was in college, one redshirt season and the rest playing, I matched up against 4 Big 12 teams in our bowl games. So we played Texas Tech, we played Oklahoma State, we played Colorado, who was a Big 12 team at the time, and we played, obviously, Texas in the national title game. And there's such a contrast in styles. I can't tell you how much. I mean, Texas Tech in 2005 is setting records, scoring 55, 60 points a game. They're setting records with their quarterback. They get in a game versus an Alabama defense with Mike Leach's offense, and also I think they scored 7 or 10 points that day against us in the Cotton Bowl. It's such a contrast in styles, and I think the Big 12 coaches are aware of it. I think SEC coaches are aware of it. I think Kirby Smart has coached through it and knows what to expect. But it's such a different game. Those guys are used to dropping back, having all the time they want to in the backfield, having their offensive line really kind of run over the defensive line in front of them, being able to really do what they want on offense. And Baker Mayfield's used to sitting back there and scrambling around and being a little bit more athletic than some of the defenders he's facing, being able to outrun some of the guys at the linebacker position in the Big 12. He's not going to have that ability in this game. And I hope that his coaches are in his ears, or I guess I say, I'm on DawgNation right now. I don't hope that his coaches are in his ears explaining that Roquan Smith and Davin Bellamy and Lorenzo Carter, those guys are faster than you. So you can try to get outside all you want to. You can try to buy time. You can try to sit in the pocket all you want to. But at some point, when that SEC speed and that front seven gets to you, you're going to get hit in the face. And you have to understand that this game is going to move very fast if you're Baker Mayfield.
Jennifer Korn in our comment section on Facebook Live is saying that college football is the way of life in the South. And that's a perfect example of how a lot of these fans are going to view this as sort of our brand of college football is better than your brand. And to that point, Mike, before you joined us, we were talking about what a couple of ESPN analysts had said about this game. David Pollack, on the one hand, seems to think that Georgia's got to bring its offense with it. He says that Oklahoma's definitely going to score 30 points. Georgia's going to have to score more than that if it wants to win. But Marcus Spears had a slightly different take. What Spears said was that if the Georgia running backs assert themselves, the way they have all season long, that he thinks that Georgia could actually coast to an easy victory given the fact that by doing that, Georgia's going to limit the possessions that Baker Mayfield has. I know you're just talking about a little bit about that matchup between the Georgia defense and Baker Mayfield a moment ago. But do you think that Georgia can assert a game plan in this game that really could keep Mayfield on the sidelines? Because obviously that's what Kirby Smart would like to try to do.
Oh, that's definitely what Kirby Smart would like to try to do. And I honestly, looking into this game a little deeper, I can't wait to see what the game plan is. And I mentioned to you before the SEC title game that I thought if Auburn got a chance to get to 30 points, that I didn't know if Georgia could kind of cover that number. I think that if Auburn gets to 30 points, that they've had the ball for a while. Jake Fromm and Georgia don't have the opportunity to kind of get there. Feel similar about this game. I think what's interesting, though, is, and you and I talked about this a ton, too, that I think that the loss to Auburn earlier in the year allowed Georgia to kind of change their defensive game plan. They didn't have to man up all the time on the defensive line. And I think you saw that play out. There was a lot of twists, a lot of stunts going on, a lot of run game stunts from this Georgia defensive line. I think they have to use some of those similar tactics when they play this Oklahoma team. Oklahoma's a good passing team, and Baker Mayfield has 4,300 passing yards on the year. But they run the ball well, and their offensive line's probably a little bit better at run blocking than a lot of people assume they are. And so I think that if you can control that line of scrimmage with that front, 5 or 6, whatever it is, nickel personnel, dime personnel that Georgia's going to have to put out there, if you can control this front with those few guys in the box, then I think you stand a great chance of winning. I think that you're not allowing them to run. You're not allowing Baker Mayfield to stay on the field. And Jake Fromm and Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel get their opportunities. I definitely think that's what Kirby Smart is looking to do, and it's going to be interesting to see the defensive game plan he puts on the field to try to get that done.
I want to talk to you about some of these Georgia assistants who've emerged as candidates for other jobs in a moment. Before do that, would you agree with me? And I'm not asking this just so you'll agree with me. You can tell me something different if you do truly feel that way. That if I'm an Oklahoma, defensive guy, if I'm an Oklahoma defensive mind right now, I've got to be just as concerned about Chubb, Michel, and DeAndre Swift, that trio of running backs. They're just as much of a concern for me as Baker Mayfield is for Georgia for different reasons, but the concern is just as great. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that. I think it's an interesting point to kind of look at it because Baker Mayfield is Oklahoma's offense. I mean, he's the catalyst. I think when you're an Oklahoma defender looking at this game in the matchup, to me, it's almost the running back position that is the catalyst for Georgia. A little bit less than one guy. I think Baker Mayfield is the one guy. If you're an Oklahoma defender, you say, we got to look at the running back position because I think all those guys bring something different to the table. And you have to understand when Nick Chubb is in or when DeAndre Swift is in, who's more likely to get the ball or who's more likely to be out on a swing route. That's what they're going to be focusing on.
I like Brandon Pope's comment in the comment section. He says, I really hope they put DeAndre Swift in the mix more with some jet sweep plays. Let that kid go. He's got the wheels to move the chains and produce the numbers on the board. And, we all saw that, obviously, in the SEC Championship, the creative ways in which he was used in Georgia's offense overall looked a lot better in that game. Mike, let me transition over to the coaching situation for a moment. And what I said before you joined us is that I'm going to take Mel Tucker to Tennessee a little bit more seriously now, given the fact that the other Tennessee candidates just seem to sort of be wilting away here a little bit. I mean, Coley, the wide receivers coach, the suggestion he might go to Texas A&M, that obviously, is the kind of thing that Coley, because of the work that he's done, he's probably warranted that kind of discussion as well. And is this just one of those things that when you're a good team and building a elite program, you can't help but have some folks sort of climbing around looking for some of your assistant coaches? Is this just the byproduct of success? Is that all this is?
Oh, that's exactly what it is. I mean, listen, and Kirby Smart's going to be getting into this territory where he's going to have to keep replacing these guys. And Alabama, I mean, I think, 3 or 4 years in a row, here it is, they've had coordinators kind of hired away. I mean, it's Kirby Smart at one point, Lane Kiffin last year. You look at a guy like Mel Tucker that used to be on staff. It's just, there's a lot of turnover. And it's tough to look at from the coaching profession standpoint and kind of blame any of these guys. They've done really well. Anytime you get a chance to coach under Nick Saban or a guy like Kirby Smart that comes from Nick Saban, they're going to get looks for other jobs. I think the biggest thing to look at is how it kind of affects recruiting. I don't think it really will a ton for Georgia in terms of what Mel Tucker and Coley are kind of bringing to the table on that front. But there is going to be a process for Kirby Smart to understand that these coaches are successful, these programs are successful. People and other programs want to be successful, so they're going to come in and grab your coaches. Who is he going to hire? Who's he going to bring in? Who's he going to be able to bounce back? That's the biggest question right now.
Michael Morrow in our comment section said, can Jim Chaney get in the mix for one of these jobs? And Mike, I want to say to Michael here, what's Jim Chaney got to do now? He just came off a great game. Can we give Chaney a little credit after he just sort of pitched a perfect game against Auburn on Saturday? At this point in time, I think the Georgia fans should want Chaney to stay, don't you?
Yeah, I do too. And listen, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. I heard this the whole time from Alabama fans when Lane Kiffin was in there. It's like, run the ball, Lane Kiffin. Tired of seeing the speed sweeps. Tired of seeing the screen pass, the outside screen passes. And then Brian Dable gets in there, and Alabama's like, you know what? Maybe Lane Kiffin wasn't so bad. And so I think you just have to be careful what you wish for. I think that right now at Georgia, Jim Chaney understands Kirby Smart's philosophy more than most offensive coordinators would. He understands don't take risk in the passing game. Don't turn the ball over and try to get the time possession and ground game going. And I think there's something to be said about coaches that understand each other and understand the philosophy of their teams and work that well together.
And I think Michael was joking, but I completely agree with what you say, that right now Chaney is a sort of a guy that gets the mindset that Kirby Smart wants to see his team approach the offensive side of the ball with. I think you're right about that. Last thing for you, obviously, Georgia's not the only SEC team in the college football playoff. If it beats Oklahoma, it could be looking at a matchup with an SEC team for the national championship with Alabama against Clemson. Alabama's in the playoff. Now looking ahead to that game against the Tigers. What do you think the thought process for Alabama is about the third in the series of the trilogy with Clemson here?
Yeah, I think that if you're Nick Saban right now, you have to go into this game making sure that the same things that beat you last year don't beat you this year. It was third down really on both sides of the ball. The Alabama's defense couldn't get off the field on third down, and they couldn't convert on the offensive side of the ball with Jalen Hurts. So I think it's interesting. I think it's intriguing that a lot of the linebackers are getting healthy at Alabama right now, but you still have Jalen Hurts and an offense that's been struggling on third down. So do you go in with the same game plan, or do you try to mix some things up, or does Tua Tagovailoa get some snaps? I know Nick Saban. He's one of the best at making adjustments, especially coming off a loss to a team, and so they're 0-1 in their last games, period, and they're 0-1 in the last game they played against Clemson. And so I think they're going to see some adjustments out of what Alabama's trying to do. I think it's going to make for a special matchup. Listen, I'm not just saying this because I'm an Alabama guy talking to Georgia people. These are two of the best matchups that I've seen in the college football playoffs so far when you talk about the two games that are going to take place.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm going to give the committee credit for putting this Final Four together because I do think four terrific teams, two terrific games, and it could make for a really well-earned national championship for whoever gets there. We'll talk more about it on AT&T SEC Country Live this afternoon. Mike, thanks for your time. We'll look forward to catching up with you then.
Always fun, Brian.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Good stuff from Mike Johnson there. We always appreciate his time here on DawgNation Daily, and hope you will check us out today on AT&T SEC Country Live. Coming up 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the SEC Country Facebook page. We hope you will check that out. By the way, let me also, as we're talking about our DawgNation invasion a little earlier, let me send a special thank you out to our friends over at Dixie Vodka, the South's best tasting vodka. They have the Dixie Vodka Tasting Lounge set up on Saturday. That was a lot of fun. And if you want to find out what it tastes like for yourself, right now Dixie's got free shipping for you. And use the promo code DixieSEC. That hard to buy for a person on your shopping list. Check out Dixie Vodka online, and you can get some free shipping when you use the promo code DixieSEC. The South's best tasting vodka. If you try it, you will believe it and say it for yourself. Everybody has been a satisfied customer that's come to one of our DawgNation Invasion events where the Dixie Vodka has been flowing, and you can enjoy that this holiday season yourself. All right, let me transition to the SEC through here. We'll talk more about these coaching situations. We'll get back to Georgia, obviously, in a moment as well. But it does look like that it's all but official that Chad Morris, the SMU head coach, former Clemson offensive coordinator, is going to be the Arkansas head coach. Now, there are a lot of wrinkles and discussion points on this. I guess initially, and let me just say here, I do think this is a good hire for Arkansas, given what was available and Arkansas's ability to kind of go out there and get something like this done as a consolation prize for not getting Gus Malzahn. This is probably pretty good. And I really feel validated for something that I said earlier a few weeks ago that maybe some people kind of laughed at the time. I think right now Arkansas has every bit as good a job as Tennessee is. And maybe it may be a half tick better because Arkansas just hired Chad Morris, and I believe that Tennessee would have liked to him. I mean, I think that we're in a real interesting sort of cross section for Tennessee where it could go one of two ways. It could sort of make a really good hire and move up. Chad Morris may have been that guy, or this could be a real retreat, much the same way that a program like Nebraska has been in retreat now for years and years and years. This could be the situation with Tennessee here. Arkansas used its money, and it's got plenty of it. It used its desire to kind of go out and get a coach, and despite the fact that it has its own turmoil with athletic directors, it kind of went out and hired Chad Morris. I know there was some criticism of kind of how all this is sort of played out, maybe sort of haphazard, and that may all be true, but ultimately Arkansas hired for what it could go out and do, a pretty good candidate here. So I feel pretty good about what Arkansas was able to do for itself. I think Hawks fans are probably, for the most part, pretty happy with this. It's not going to be, the biggest splash hire name of all time necessarily, but not a bad hire either, and a much better situation than what Tennessee's dealing with. And by the way, speaking of that, with Morris now probably off the market going to Arkansas, Mike Norvell, one of those names that had been considered a candidate for SEC job, staying at Memphis. He signs an extension to stay there in Memphis with the Tigers. This just really puts Tennessee in kind of a tough spot. And really, I think the lowest point for the Tennessee coaching search may actually be right now, because those two names, Norvell and Morris, were sort of like the last couple guys with any head coaching experience that Tennessee was sort of legitimately going to reach out and hire. I mean, this is Tennessee sort of redrawing its list all over again. And I don't quite know what's going on there with T. Martin, the offensive coordinator at USC, but it does not seem that Martin is being taken seriously as a candidate for head coach. There were reports that Tennessee did not reach out to him until very late. I guess Martin himself leaked that there was a discussion, and or someone close to Martin, probably the better way to say that. The description was that the conversations went well, which makes it sound like he was trying to convince them that he should get the job more than they were trying to convince him that he should take it. There are even some reports out there that Martin would consider being the offensive coordinator at Tennessee, essentially making a lateral move from USC, which just goes to show you that Martin's trying to make his case, the national championship quarterback who's, as I said, offensive coordinator at USC, but it does not seem to be working. Charles Kaiser in the comment section mentioned that just like Georgia defensive coordinator Mel Tucker reportedly had a second interview with Tennessee, looks like Alabama defensive coordinator Jeremy Pruitt has also had a second interview with Tennessee, and I believe it was Mark Schlabach who initially reported that also. I will say that I believe that Pruitt's got a really bright future in coaching. I think he's a really good recruiter. I think that, he's probably not the same profile as Kirby Smart would have been, because Kirby had so much experience at the same place. But Philip Fulmer, the Tennessee athletic director, you could do a lot worse in making a hire than with Jeremy Pruitt, who's the kind of guy that sort of brings that sort of tenacious recruiting ability that I believe that Tennessee needs right now. So we'll see where Fulmer goes on all of this, and if Jeremy Pruitt truly is one of those guys, along with maybe Mel Tucker, who kind of gets in this mix and in this discussion. This is a worse situation for Tennessee than it is for Georgia, I can promise you that, because while Mel Tucker is a very important part of the equation in Georgia, Georgia's got the ability to kind of go out and replenish its stock of assistants, but it is getting really, really late for Tennessee to make any kind of head coaching hire and give that guy any chance to put a recruiting class together. I sort of, for one, hope that Mel Tucker doesn't take this job, because I think he deserves better than what Tennessee's going to give him. I truly do. I mean, it's such a hamstrung, hand-tied behind your back situation with the short recruiting cycle here. I think Tucker could be a really good coach, but the situation at Tennessee is a mess and a nightmare right now. So we will certainly have to see how all of that goes. For now, let me get back to the Georgia Bulldogs here for a moment. And I guess this is a slight complaint, although maybe at this point in time it's going to fall on deaf ears. We now know who the Heisman finalists are, and we know that Roquan Smith is not going to be one of them. Baker Mayfield is essentially the only Heisman finalist. He's going to win the award, but invited to New York, we have Lamar Jackson, the Louisville quarterback, who a lot of folks will tell you his stats this year are actually better than they were a year ago. Jackson is going, and Bryce Love, the Stanford running back, is going to go as well. Love finishes the year pretty banged up. He's a little bit like Kerryon Johnson, one of those guys that's kind of hobbling his way to the finish line here, but he's had a really good year and a Heisman finalist. But Baker Mayfield's going to win the award. The case that I've been trying to make, and I'm not the only one making this case, but I've tried to make it as loudly and clearly as I can, is that I believe two things. I believe, A, the SEC was good enough this year that it ought to have a Heisman finalist. Whether it's going to be, Kerryon Johnson, who I just mentioned, somebody from Alabama, Minka Fitzpatrick maybe, somebody from the SEC ought to be a Heisman finalist, because the league has two teams in the playoff. You had a third team, Auburn, that was on the doorstep of at least contention there. This is a good year in the SEC, good enough that somebody ought to get Heisman consideration. And the guy that I think should have gotten some of that consideration was Roquan Smith. It did not happen, and it's not Smith's fault. Smith, obviously, you can't have a better year than what Roquan Smith had for Georgia. It seems like he got national attention just too late. By the end of the season, he's getting some of that national attention, but overall, the national attention just sort of comes too late. Let me give you an example of this. Greg McElroy, speaking on one of those sort of long marathon championship drive shows on ESPN, gave Roquan Smith the credit that he needed, but it doesn't come at the right time. What McElroy says is, I think Roquan Smith belongs. He means in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. I mean it. You look at what he's meant for Georgia. Really, the last couple of games symbolize the importance of his production. I believe against Georgia Tech, he had like 12,000, 145 tackles, something like that. That's what they gave him. He might have had 25. They spied him on everything. That's obviously McElroy giving Roquan Smith great credit for how the game against Georgia Tech went, how the game, you could say the same thing about how the SEC championship game went against Auburn, the work that he was doing there. He has just been sort of a one-man wrecking crew for Georgia all season long. And we all kind of know how this works. You can be good and not get enough attention. And in Roquan Smith's case, that's kind of what he is, at least in terms of the Heisman Trophy. He's won the Butkus. He's going to win a lot more awards before it's all said and done. Almost for sure going to be an All-American. He's going to get a lot of attention in sort of those specific instances for those very specific parameters. But can my man not go to New York City when you have a year like what Roquan Smith put together? I think he deserves it. I just think that the kinds of things that Greg McElroy were saying just came way too late. And so what I'd like to see happen in the future in college football is to sort of expand the conversation for who is considered a Heisman Trophy finalist. Listen, I'm not a Pollyanna-ish type person here. I don't want to be naive. The winner of this award is almost always going to be a quarterback, and when it's not a quarterback, it's going to be a running back, and if it's not a running back, it's still going to be somebody who plays with the football in his hand. That's just the way this kind of stuff works. Even though we all know that offense, defense are equal, and special teams is a big part of what goes on here as well. It's the glory, playmakers who get the attention when it comes to a Heisman Trophy awards and things like that. I don't expect that to change. But I believe that going to New York as a Heisman finalist is sort of its own kind of award. So in the future, what I would love to see is there be sort of designated spots to kind of represent more than just the same kind of thing. I mean, look what you got going this year. You got the quarterback who won it last year, and the quarterback who's going to win it this year, and a token running back from Stanford kind of thrown into the mix there. That just seems that seems short-sighted. It doesn't seem to fully tell the story of what the award should be. I think a defensive player ought to be included, an SEC player ought to be included. In the discussion this year, that would have meant for me Roquan Smith. All right, so that is that on that. I would like to see Roquan Smith go. He's not going to, but I do think it's a bit of a disservice that he won't be there. Let me wrap up here with a couple other thoughts as well. By the way, I got my travel booked for Pasadena yesterday, and boy, let me tell you, I am feeling the pain of so many of you. This is quite an expensive trip and quite a challenge to put together. I know many of you have been kind of weighing in on how you're getting there. We'll continue to talk a little bit more about that on DawgNation Daily. I'm just excited that we're all getting to go and we're all going to be a part of such a big event for those of you who will get a chance to be there. It's going to be a great week for DawgNation. A lot of fun. Let me also say 325 days from now, we'll all be taking another fun trip. That one to Jacksonville for the world's largest outdoor cocktail party once again. And no matter what we have going on here at DawgNation Daily, we always pause for a moment to think about the Gators and how much we hate them. 325 days from right now, we beat them again. Also, congrats to Georgia basketball. Got a win last night at home against Winthrop. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily. And for those of you who are with us right now, we'll knock out some comments. We're just glad to have you on the program today. So I got my travel booked. I am going into LAX, which some of you had to be a little bit more creative. It was a little easier for me because I need to be out there a little earlier and staying a little later than probably most of y'all are. So it was a little easier to kind of go in and out of LAX. The flights, boy, they are expensive though. They are expensive, and I certainly get a lot of you who are some of you I've heard going into Phoenix. I've heard some of you going into Las Vegas, San Diego, and essentially renting cars and driving there at that point in time. So there is a lot of that going on. So we'll try to do our best to sort of talk about kind of how this is all playing out and kind of how all this is going. So if we hear about some great deal, some great bargain, or some just really good idea for how you can reduce the overall cost of travel, we'll try to talk about that a little bit. Randy Hall says flying into Ontario. Now, Ontario's not in Canada. That's one of those other airports that's near L.A. and Pasadena a little bit. So Ontario's another thing I've heard people going to. Brandon Pope asks if Shea Patterson's going to Michigan. I think there's a really good chance that he does. I know that Jeremy Birmingham had kind of tweeted out the idea that he might go to a Michigan. Before he even announced his intention to transfer, there was some thought that he might do that. So there is a chance that Patterson could be in the mix for Michigan. The other place I've heard for him is also UCLA as well. But it seems like Patterson does want to leave Ole Miss. It seems like he's going to petition the SEC for kind of a hardship waiver to be eligible right away. I have no idea if he'd be granted that or not. That's obviously what he'd like. If he is, I think he becomes a kingmaker in college football. That's a good quarterback when he's healthy. And for a team like Michigan that may just be a quarterback away, or even a team like UCLA, who under Chip Kelly would like to have a pretty good quarterback to kind of get things going with, that could be a real sea change in college football where Patterson ends up going. And by the way, Patterson leaving also opens the door at Ole Miss for another quarterback, and there is some thought that the current Florida commit, Matt Corral, who was in the mix with Georgia for a little while, Corral's supposed to be visiting Ole Miss this weekend, so that could get interesting there too. Wayne Folan says he's going to, for the game, driving to his living room to watch on his 75-inch Sony. Because that's a pretty good idea yourself. You're saving a lot of money and having a really good time. Mark Cochran says, do we know more about the two that got into trouble? He's meaning, I'm assuming Jason Stanley and H.S. Patrick here. I do know the police body cam footage is available out. I haven't seen it yet, but I do know that body cam footage is out there. Maurice Carter says that we should do a travel agreement like we did for the Notre Dame game. He's talking about like one of those full-fledged DawgNation invasions where we kind of, chartered a bunch of buses and things like that. Maurice, here's the deal. I think we probably would have done something like that, but we just don't have enough time to plan for it. I mean, you got to realize that our parent company is a gigantic company, which means a bunch of lawyers. So, whereas if it's just like you and me and two buddies going to take a trip, we'll just sort of make plans and go. Like for something like what we do, there's like 1,000 lawyers that have to get involved and vet every, dot and tittle of the contract. So we just can't move fast enough on something like that. There are a lot of companies that sort of do that kind of thing for a living. If we could have had more time, obviously at the end of the season, it's just sort of hard to do that. We probably would have planned a more long-range, wide-ranging type trip. In the short term, that's just not an easy thing to do. Carl Barr says, doesn't the Rose Bowl have package deals? Yeah, listen, there are a lot of companies that out in California that specialize in this kind of thing. It's not really my place to recommend one or the other because I have never used any of them personally, and so I'll stay out of the recommendation game on that. But there are a lot of companies that do this for a living. Craig Wassick, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Craig, says that he's heard that flying into Vegas is cheaper. One of the things that makes flying into Vegas cheaper is the fact that there are just so many flights to Las Vegas. The problem is when you have a whole bunch of people from one part of the country going to the same place, it just creates a level of scarcity for the seats on the plane. But Las Vegas is the kind of place that there's 1 million flights to every day, and so there's just a lot less scarcity, and so you're going to be able to get a cheaper flight there. And I'm hearing it's about 4-hour drive, something like that, 4 or 5 hour drive. So there is that. Thomas Cleveland Harris says Roquan Smith should hang out the Heisman. If you can get past him the door, you can be a finalist. I do like that idea, Thomas. That's what Roquan should do. He should stand right there at the threshold, and if Bryce Love or Lamar Jackson or Baker Mayfield can get around him and get up to that stage, they can claim the trophy. Otherwise, it belongs to Roquan. I do agree with that. Zach Smith says, will there be a DawgNation invasion for the Rose Bowl? There will be a version of the DawgNation invasion. We'll be giving you more details on that, but a little bit different. Brandon Pope says, first of all, some kind words. I appreciate that. Brandon, thanks for those kind words. Mike Jackson says about the two teams, it's two offenses, both built to take full advantage of the other team's weakness, a formula for fun. Yeah, it really is. I mean, you could have two very frustrating outcomes here because if Oklahoma is on the field a lot, they are just going to compile some yards and points. And I think we talked about this yesterday during our sort of video comment portion. For the life of me, and I try to watch football as closely as anybody. I'm not an X's and O's expert, but I try to watch the game closely. These teams that execute that, I guess they call it a pop pass, that run pass option where you just quickly fake the handoff and then just dump the ball over the head of a linebacker in front of a defensive back. I don't know how you're supposed to stop that. I really don't. When that thing is timed well, and Oklahoma times it well, it is just virtually impossible because the fake handoff is enough to freeze a linebacker for that long. And that's about all you need for a good quarterback who's accurate, just to sort of whip it over his head. It's really, really, it's almost like I played basketball in high school, and I don't care how much you try, like a ball fake gets people every single time, right? I mean, like this deal right here is going to get people in the air every single time. It's just human nature. And so, it's not a full-on play-action pass. It's just a, shotgun snap, fake handoff, and deliver. And you just can't help but freeze for a moment when you see that occur. And that's why these teams, when they got the football, they're moving it. They're going to get yards. They're going to get points. But can you suffocate the Oklahoma rushing attack, Rodney Anderson's legal status notwithstanding? Can you suffocate the rushing attack? Can you keep your offense on the field and that offense off the field? I mean, it really is, to a certain degree, that simple. The big issue, though, is, and I know we'll talk about this a lot leading up to it, the big issue is going to be, don't get down early. I mean, Georgia gave up the early touchdown to Auburn on Saturday, and everything was fine. I do think the Oklahoma offense is a good bit better than the Auburn offense. That kind of changes that a little bit. You don't want to get down 14-0. I just don't think you do. Because if you get down 14-0, I think you still got to be patient. I think you still got to try to let your running game do its thing and hope that the game sort of worked itself out over the course of time. But you want to talk about whether you're watching the game from Pasadena or from the comfort of your own home. That is some nervous, anxious Georgia fans. There may be no fingernails left for any of us if Georgia gets down early in this game and has to hope that it can sort of slowly build itself back in, because there will be a temptation to start trying to throw some haymakers back towards Oklahoma if Oklahoma lands a couple early. James Crump brings up an interesting point. I'm actually going to talk about this more on the show tomorrow. James says that the media is sleeping on Georgia. And I think to a certain extent that is true a little bit. I think that what we have here is a situation that Georgia fans hate and Kirby Smart probably loves. I think Georgia fans would like to get some more attention. Mayfield's the Heisman Trophy winner. Alabama is been in the playoff. This is the 4th straight year. Clemson's the defending national champion. Every team other than Georgia in the playoff kind of has its own calling card. For Georgia, even though it's got like 1 million fans, more than that probably, it doesn't really have that national calling card as of yet. This is the first time in the playoff. Georgia's got some really good players. It doesn't have any sort of breakout celebrity star. Georgia, of the 4 teams in the playoff, is going to get by far the least national attention. Kirby Smart loves that, I would guess. I would imagine that Alabama would be jealous of that, would like to sort of kind of have some of the same cover and anonymity that Georgia gets to enjoy. I think that Oklahoma and Clemson probably have a little extra burden that comes with the extra attention that they get. I think fans wish that they were getting some of the same media coverage the other 3 teams are going to get. I think that Kirby Smart is sort of happy to kind of fly under the radar here. There's a little bit of an interesting contrast between Kirby and his fans when it comes to that. Scott McFadden says, love being the underdog. Well, in this case, though, how much of an underdog is Georgia really? I mean, didn't I see there had been some line movement? Michael Shalaba, isn't that true? Hasn't there been some line movement in this game? Is it Georgia -1 now? Let me see if I can pull this up. Now, when I pull this up at work, you can't see this, but the first thing that comes up is it says the site can't be reached. But then I'm able to sort of get through here. Just like your workplace, we have some websites that get blocked here. They don't quite realize how much gambling websites are part of what we need to do from time to time here when it comes to our show. All right, let me see if I can pull this up. And naturally, this is... All right, well, I can't find it. This is all this week's FCS games. Is it Georgia -1? Is that what it is? -2. So Georgia's gone from it was Georgia +3 when it started, right? So it's gone from Georgia +3 to Georgia -2. So, Georgia as the point spread underdog, at least right now, that's not necessarily the case. So, thank you for checking that. Lewis Johnson says Alabama's also a 2.5-point favorite against Clemson. Drew Stevens says, I like our wide receivers and tight ends against their secondary and linebacker group. Fromm has already shown what he can do with decent protection. Yeah, listen. I mean, I think this is actually a pretty good game for Jake Fromm because he is good at the one thing that is important when it comes to something like this. I mean, this is not going to be, Jeff Holland does not play for Oklahoma here. Fromm should have a little bit more time to throw, and Fromm's greatest strength is probably his quick decision-making, and this is the kind of game where you can really use that. Timothy Canelo says, do you think Georgia could wear the black uniforms at the Rose Bowl? I mean, listen, a lot of January 1st in Pasadena, it's pretty sunny. I don't know that Georgia wants to wear the black uniforms out in the California sunshine, but I could be wrong about that. Nick Simmons says, let me see if I can read this. How do you think the following will be? All the way to California, I've looked into it, and 2 people would be easy to say, 4,000 or 5,000 to go. So, Nick, is what you're saying you're looking for someone to sort of be like a riding companion and see if you could do the whole trip for around 4 or 5K? Maybe so. Maybe so. How much is gas for a cross-country trip? Have any of y'all ever driven cross-country? No, I'm getting a lot of no's. I've always wanted to drive cross-country. Now I'm the kind of person that would get hopelessly lost and probably fall into harm's way. I'm probably not a good candidate for a cross-country trip, but I've always wanted to take one. Something about that just seems really, really fun. If I had more time, I'd probably do that for this one. I mean, wouldn't it be great to, I don't know, buy some old Volkswagen van or something and just drive cross-country? Paint the thing red and black? That'd be fantastic. Scott McFadden says, Pollock says Oklahoma puts up 30 on the Georgia defense. I think he secretly says those things to fire up UGA. So in this case, Scott, I think that Pollock probably got misconstrued a little bit. I actually don't think that he was taking a shot at the Georgia defense because if you look at Oklahoma, they score 30 against everybody. I mean, and I think one of the things that we sort of misunderstand from time to time is just how much total possessions and total plays run impact stats. It's actually kind of a pet peeve of mine that people will look at, Oklahoma and the total yards they've compiled and the points they scored and say, oh, well, they're twice as good offensively as Georgia is. The truth is that's not the case. In terms of executing what they're trying to do, they're actually a little bit more similar than you might think. They're both in the top 10 of the country in offensive efficiency on these sort of advanced metrics type websites because efficiency takes out the number of plays that you run, the number of stats you compile, and sort of factors in your success rate. How successful are you doing at what you try to do on that play? If you run it, did you get the yards you needed? If you passed, you get the pass yards that you need. So a lot of the window dressing of the yards and points for Oklahoma can be a bit of a misnomer. That and maybe that's what Pollock's kind of falling prey to a little bit here as well, thinking that the game is going to be the same kind of game it is in every other game that Oklahoma plays, because most of the teams that Oklahoma plays are teams that are willing to allow it to sort of play at the pace it wants to go. These other Big 12, even TCU, which is sort of like the Big 12's version of a defensive-minded team, they're even willing to go, a million possessions with you. Doug Rayburn asked who the home team is. Doug, to be honest with you, I don't 100% know. Somebody in here knows for sure, though. Ken Blankenship says Rodrigo's family is going to road trip. I'd love to do it. I really would. Charles Michael says pay cash for gas in California saves you a lot. Is it cheaper out there, or would they be more expensive? Nick Badano says one way or another, driving's cheaper than an airline ticket. That is true. A good point from Gregory Nowak, who says that Georgia's the lower seats, therefore will probably be wearing the white jerseys. That's a good point. Daniel Goldsmith says that he's driven to Denver a lot. He says it actually costs a lot more than you think to take a long drive like that. All right, Craig Wassick also says that he drove from Atlanta to L.A. 36 hours straight, filled up 5 or 6 times. Is that right, 5 or 6 times? Jordy Mathis says, drove from Waycross to San Diego. You know, talk about two very different cities. From the Okefenokee Swamp all the way to the Pacific Ocean 4 times. He says, don't do it. I don't know that I want to do it 4 times, but doing it once would be great. Jeffrey Tucker from Savannah to Western Colorado. That sounds awesome. Steve Schiavini drove from L.A. to Atlanta in 2005. That's kind of a cool drive, I guess. Oh, okay, so here's some specific numbers. Billy Howard, and I don't know if this is fascinating to y'all or not. I apologize if it's not. Billy Howard said he drove to Phoenix for a Falcons playoff game in 2008, and it was about a couple $100 in gas. So, Billy, not to get into your personal business, but if I'd spent a couple $100 in gas, I guess I'd be a little frustrated because can't you buy a plane ticket to Phoenix for about $200 normally, or at least in that range? I guess I would sort of hope to be, if I was going to drive, I would sort of hope to be able to save more money than that. Ken Blankenship sort of agrees with that too. Right now, it's cheaper to fly. Randy Hall says I should hook up with the Chevy Chase and hit the road. Yeah, like a little vacation. What is it, Wally World? Is that where they end up at? Mike Giving says, call the VW bus the dog pound. Yeah, I'm telling you. Because it'd be way easier to buy a vehicle than it would be to rent a vehicle, right? Because, you know, sometimes you want to put the wear and tear on your own car. Just buy something specifically for this. I think that's a great idea. Actually, I don't know if it's a great idea, but it'd be a fun idea. So here's the thing I also haven't heard anybody saying yet. I've heard a lot of people flying from, like, say, Atlanta to these cities near L.A. What I have not heard yet is somebody driving from Atlanta, and a lot of the issues here involve flights from Atlanta. I know many of you don't live in Atlanta, but a lot of these issues are for people in the Atlanta area trying to get out there. What I have not heard from many people is, okay, I'm driving to Birmingham, or I'm driving to Charlotte, or I'm driving to Jacksonville and flying from there to L.A. I wonder if it's a little easier to get to an adjacent airport to Atlanta and fly to L.A. I haven't really heard of anybody doing that yet. That seems like something you could do. Jeff O'Neill said he spent $500, I'm assuming, in gas from Key West to Atlanta. Boy, that's expensive. That's expensive. Okay, here's our buddy Mike Johnson. So this is what Mike did. He drove to Phoenix for the national championship 2 years ago. Rented a minivan, hit the road with 2 buddies. Got there in 25 hours. I mean, wouldn't that be great? You know, some guys just hanging out in a minivan, driving to Phoenix. That sounds really fun. But I didn't have to work. That's what I would do, I believe. That's the kind of thing you wouldn't forget. And you got to realize, I mean, I am as corny in real life as I come across on this show. We'd be stopping at every tourist trap, like every, you know, world's largest ball of yarn, you know, all that kind of stuff. We'd be stopping and looking at all that so I could take a picture of it. We'd absolutely be doing that. Julie Craig says airlines take full advantage of this stuff. The other thing is, in addition to like the you know, scarcity of the tickets to LA, you've also got holiday season. So you got just regular holiday travel here as well that makes it already pretty expensive. All right, let me try to get a couple more and then get ready to get out of here. By the way, I drove my kids to school this morning before the start of the show. I was telling the folks that work with us, I feel like I need like some sort of like medal of honor for that. Like my wife does it every day. But somehow like getting your kids ready and taking them to school and then also making it to work feels like one of like the great accomplishments of my life. Nick Lurch says that that his wife also likes the this tourist trap type stuff. Yeah, Nick, listen. I just think that's kind of part of it, right? I love that kind of stuff. Like we go to Amelia Island every year on vacation. There's a petting zoo on the way on I-16. Some of y'all know where this is. Stop at it every single year. Now we have 2 young kids, but I think there's a chance we may stop at it even if it wasn't for the kids, if I were to be completely honest here. J. Scott Williams says that I missed the Marcus Spears talk. Yeah, we did that off the top of the show. I'll tell you what we'll do, Jay. We're about to get Scott. We're about to get off the air here. You can go back and either rewatch the beginning portion of the broadcast, or I'm going to post the audio version of the show. Some of the folks that work with me are going to help me get that up. We're going to get that up right away so you can hear what Spears said about Georgia. It's kind of an interesting discussion. That's right off the top of the show here today. All right, 2 quick final points. Chad Hayes says, ran an RV for a week, drove from Florida. Let me read this. Hold on, Chad, sorry. Drove from Florida to Gate, Oklahoma, almost Kansas, then back to Florida, 28 hours one way. The RV costs $1,500 for a week. I tell you, that's a great deal for the person that's not driving the RV. Can you imagine just sort of kick back and relaxing while this thing rolls down the road? I'd love to do that. The person driving the RV is going to have a little bit of trouble there. Darian Ford says, anybody know any pilots? That's the other thing, too. You're going to hear more people doing this. These airline tickets are getting so expensive now that you can just about charter a flight for as expensive as some of these airline tickets are going to be. I mean, that is absolutely true. Someone's going to be doing that. Someone is absolutely going to be doing that. All right, we got to get ready to go. Yeah, we got to go. All right. We'll talk to you tomorrow. We'll see you at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for AT&T SEC Country Live. 10 a.m. tomorrow for DawgNation Daily. We'll do more about the game against Oklahoma. It'll be a lot of fun. We'll see you then. Y'all have a great day.